Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. Much of the evidence in a trial comes from the mouths of witnesses. What they say is evidence that can be used by both sides. In the case of Karen Reed, a woman accused of running over her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, the evidence provided by a witness named Brian Higgins is crucial because he was both friends with the victim, John O'Keefe, and was engaged in some romantic overtures with the defendant, Karen Reed. I've covered this case in depth on my weeknight show, Closing Arguments, and what you're about to see are some of the most important moments from that program as I investigate the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe was a single parent of 2 children he adopted when his sister and her husband tragically died within 2 months of one another. He was also a Boston police officer. John was dating Karen Reed for a couple of years when more tragedy struck. After a night of bar hopping with Karen in downtown Canton, Massachusetts, John was found dead on the front lawn of another officer's home who was hosting an after-hours party. Prosecutors say Karen ran him over after a heated argument fueled by jealousy and a soured relationship. But the defense says he was killed inside the home, and the homeowners, along with other people in the house and local and state police, conspired to frame Karen Reed. One person identified as being part of the conspiracy is ATF agent Brian Higgins, who was at the bar and the party that night. What exactly was the nature of his relationship with Karen Reed and with John O'Keefe? And does his timeline from that night make sense? We'll take a look as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. And I want to begin tonight and state something that I don't think is being stated enough, which is, and you've got, prosecutors who are charging murder, and you've got a defense team that is also accusing people of committing a murder. So, why would anyone kill him? Why would anyone kill John O'Keefe? Now, especially if you know John O'Keefe. You know that his family's already suffered an incredible tragedy with the loss of his sister and his brother-in-law and his niece and nephew who lost both parents within 2 months of each other. And now these 2 children being raised by John. So if you knew John O'Keefe, and if you had just an inkling of a heart, you would never even consider taking his life. Not only because of what you do to John, but what you do to his parents, and most of all, what you do to those 2 children. How anyone could do that on purpose, which is what's being alleged here by the prosecution and the defense. Obviously, they're pointing different ways. But it comes back, and everyone's pointing fingers at people who know John O'Keefe. So why would anyone kill him? And I think that's a question that needs to be more clearly answered by both or either side if you want this jury to understand your theory of the case and what happened here. Now, I know there's only one person on trial, and I know only one side has a burden of proof. We know that. That's the way our system works. So, why would Karen Reed do this? Why would anyone in that house who knows John O'Keefe, was inviting him over, was hanging out with him at the bar, why would they do it? So today, there was a witness on the stand who I think carries with him what I'm calling a double-edged motive, Brian Higgins. This is a guy who, on the one hand, prosecutors are bringing him in to talk about, some sort of thing going on between him and Karen to prove that, their relationship is soured, so somehow that feeds a motive to Karen Reed to take John O'Keefe's life and not care about it because their relationship is soured and she's looking in other places. And then on the other hand, would John Higgins, because of some sort of love triangle, want to take out John O'Keefe and do that to his parents, do that to his family, and do that to those 2 children? None of it makes sense to me. Coming up next.
Defendant responded, I don't know, you're just my type. I responded, you think you can handle me? I thought you were happy, question mark. Defendant responded, how do you know if I'm happy? I said, I just assumed. Defendant responded, I was, but things have deteriorated.
He took an oath to protect and serve.
But now this former police officer is accused of murder.
We'll take you inside the courtroom as Miles Bryant faces a jury.
The Taken Teen murder trial, today on Court TV.
Through the years, I've covered dozens of murder cases involving love triangles. But the case of Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, and Brian Higgins was not your typical love triangle. Here's more of our investigation. What I want to do, those text messages, I want you to really get an understanding and a flavor for the back and forth between Karen Reed and Brian Higgins, because this is very unexpected, but perhaps incredibly important and significant for both sides. Let's take a look and a listen.
You cranky now, question mark? Defendant said, haha, no, just stop being so anti-couples. Most couples don't even like each other. I said, name a few. Defendant said, name a few? I don't know. All of them, question mark. They all want to hang out with single people. And then I said, Defendant responded, you're hot. I responded, are you serious or messing with me? Defendant responded, no, I'm serious. I responded, failing is mutual. Is that bad? How long have you thought that? Defendant responded, are you okay driving? You don't want to stay here. I responded back, I'm fine. I have an office at the PD. You didn't answer the question. And then it starts to say, defendant said, rather you stay here. I wish. I think you're messing with me. The defendant said, why do you think that? I responded, because this is so out of left field. Where did these feelings come from? Defendant responded, I just think you're like me. I said, meaning, question mark. Defendant said, do you have your own kids? I said, I have no kids. How am I like you, question mark. Hello? And defendant responded, aren't we alike? I responded, I think so. So why did you get my number and reach out to me? And I think the defendant put a question mark on that bubble, I believe. Shoot straight with me. Defendant responded, I told you, I just think we're alike, right? Couple question marks. I responded, yes, agree. Now what? Defendant responded, I don't know. I said, shouldn't you know? Defendant responded, do you like me? I said, yes, from jump. Defendant said, when was jump? I said, first time I saw you. Defendant responded, when was that? I said, Hillside for your sure. Hillside for sure? When were you interested? Defendant responded, I don't know, you're just my type. I responded, you think you can handle me? I thought you were happy, question mark. Defendant responded, how do you know if I'm happy? I said, I just assumed. Defendant responded, are you hard to handle? I may have put a question mark. Then I said, what do you like about me? Defendant responded, I just feel like you're from my neighborhood. I said, yes, yeah, ditto. Defendant responded, and I think you're hot. You really think that? I have always thought that about you. Defendant responded, what? I responded that you're hot, smart, witty, but I didn't think you were interested. Defendant responded, witty? I responded, yeah, meaning quick with a response. Tell me why you got my number and reached out to me. Defendant responded, just thought we were the same / from the same neighborhood. I responded, are you afraid to say what's on your mind? What's in your mind? And then I said, on. Defendant responded, no, didn't I? No, didn't I? Question mark. I'm glad I stopped by. I should have come earlier. Do you really live in Mansfield? Defendant responded, yeah, I was basically begging you. I responded, you don't have to bed me. I meant to say beg. Defendant responded, huh? I said, I will give you what you want. How are you texting right now? And I said, leaving me hanging. Defendant responded, no. I typed kids and then kinda. Defendant responded, how am I texting? And I began to say, is everyone asleep? I just wide awake on my phone. Yes, they are. I said, I should have stayed, LOL. So now what, question mark. Defendant said, yes, you should have. I responded, that would have been distracting. So now what? So no, what? And then I said, now. Defendant said, now what, question mark. I responded, balls in your court. Defendant said, what do you want? I responded, loaded question. What do you want, question mark. Defendant responded, I asked you, exclamation point. I in turn said, nope, you initiated this. Defendant said, hey, we're single and we don't have kids. We can do whatever we want. I responded, don't you have a boyfriend, question mark. Defendant responded, where are you, question mark. I said, Canton. Defendant said, where, question mark. I responded, my office is at the PD. Why are you going to Mansfield, question mark. Defendant responded, where is that? I said, Canton PD. Defendant said, I have a house there from before I reconnected W. John. I responded, oh, I feel like you're not really saying what's on your mind. Do you like me? Question mark. I responded, yes, clearly. Defendant said, come over my house. I responded, when? Question mark. Defendant said, when works for you? I said, whoever, and then whenever. When works for you? Question mark. The defendant said, I asked you first. I responded, I think you're messing with me. Defendant said, I'm glad you came over tonight, with some type of face. I responded, me too, balls in your court. What do you want, Karen? You looked great tonight. Are you going home tonight or tomorrow AM? Defendant texted, we kissed, comma, right? Question mark. So then I put a question mark on her question and said, is this a trick question? Defendant said, I don't know when I'm going home. I'm selling my house, with what I think is a smiley face. What a trick question, and a couple of question marks. I responded, are you moving to Canton? I'm following your lead with this. Defendant responded, I live here, but I have property in Enfield. I'm guessing it's Medfield. Defendant said, why my lead? I don't want any responsibility. I responded, you started this, right? Question mark. Why did you get my number? And it says each out to me. It meant to say reach out to me. I then said, still have not told me. Defendant said, sorry, should I not have? I responded, I'm fine with it. Just don't know why you can't answer. Defendant said, you're mad at me? I said, OMG, no, not at all. You're being silly. Defendant said, I told you, exclamation point. I just think you like me and I'm attracted to you. And then she said, a lot. I responded, feeling is mutual. I just never saw this coming. Defendant said, why? Question mark. I responded, because I just assumed you were happy with your situation. Defendant responded, I was, but things have deteriorated.
Still to come.
It was her that went out and got Brian Higgins' text number. It was her that was inviting him over to her house. It was her that showed up at Brian Higgins' apartment. And if she shows up at his apartment to have a drink, the sign is she's open for business that night.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates continues next, only on Court TV.
If a witness begins to testify in a way to minimize facts or is evasive or elusive, it can be a real problem with the jury. So the question is, what will the jury think of the testimony of Brian Higgins?
I was physically attracted to her, yes.
Sexually attracted to her was my question.
Well, I think in the text I said, you're hot.
Okay. So my question again, Mr. Higgins, you seem to not want to answer my question. My question is, were you or were you not sexually attracted to my client?
Yes.
What does this all mean? What does this all mean? Let me bring in our guests, our trial insiders. Karen Reed supporter, creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page, Nick Rocco. Also joining us, the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan, and criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr. Great to have everyone with us on this Friday night. Nick, what does this mean? Were you shocked? Were you floored by any of this, or did you know about this going in?
Well, we've heard about these text messages for a while now. And as far as this text thread goes, this was shortly after the Aruba trip. I believe this was more to somewhat get back at John, make him jealous or something along the lines of that. It seems like Brian Higgins was trying to pursue this into a relationship more than Karen was, due to the fact that he's double, triple texting. And, you know, at the end of it, ultimately, she stops messaging him around, I think it was January 23rd. She stopped messaging him. And I believe this gives more motive to Brian Higgins to want to do something than actually Karen Reed wanting to kill John.
Kevin, what do you think? What does this mean? And were you shocked?
No, not shocked. I mean, it's sleazy behavior. It's flirting. I tell you one thing that we didn't see was obsessive behavior on either part, right? So I don't think motive here. There was no animus towards John. There's no sign of stalking on either part. We can see that in relationships. So it was just kind of some sleazy flirting. So this is a problem. This part of some of the day went well for the defense, but this was not one of them, because this really didn't establish any kind of a motive for Brian Higgins to be part of a murder conspiracy cover-up plot.
Joseph, your thoughts about this? I mean, the jury's going to pay attention once this stuff starts making its way out into the courtroom, the way the rest of us are paying attention to it. What does it mean? Who does it help? Who does it hurt?
Wow. Look, when the defense promised there would be fireworks today, this could not have been what they envisioned. Just turn on the local news at 6 o'clock. It's all about the texts. Here's the problem. Here's why this is so injurious to the defense. Even though they have no burden of proof, they're trying to sell to this jury this far-fetched, vast conspiracy. But to do that, Karen Reed needs to muster every piece of goodwill she can with this jury. She needs to be portrayed as this innocent, naive victim that would be susceptible to being framed. Any hope that she had the goodwill of that jury was absolutely destroyed today. You know, it's been leaking out over the past couple of weeks. We've heard anecdotal pieces of information that she can be irrational. She can be jealous. What did we learn today? She wasn't the doting surrogate to her niece and nephew. It seems like she really didn't embrace that role. She wasn't the doting girlfriend to John. But even worse, she comes off as deceptive and a mass manipulator. It was her that went out and got Brian Higgins' text number. It was her that was inviting him over to her house. It was her that showed up at Brian Higgins' apartment. And if she shows up at his apartment to have a drink, the sign is she's open for business that night. Brian Higgins was the one that showed restraint, that didn't want to engage in anything sexual with her until he had clarity that her and John were no longer going to be a couple. And as far as it showing motive for Brian Higgins, it makes no sense. He's going to kill.
Well, let me ask you the other part of this, though, Joseph. Does it do anything for the motive for the prosecution? He's their witness, first of all. They have the burden, and there's only one person actually on trial here for murder.
Well, here's what it does for the prosecution. They're trying to sell this conspiracy. And again, she now looks like someone capable of manipulating a situation. And as for motive for the prosecution, in Massachusetts, evidence of a hostile relationship, evidence of acrimony in the relationship, of a sour relationship, can be used to argue motive. I'm not saying that it's compelling motive, but the more injurious piece of this is Karen Read completely lost her luster in the eyes of that jury today. Make no mistake about it. They're going to be instructed. You can't decide on likes or dislikes, bias or sympathy. But make no mistake about it, that creeps into the collective mindset of the jury. I think this was really, really injurious to her today.
Brian Higgins is a true double-edged sword in the Karen Read murder trial. If, in fact, Karen Read is making a play for Brian, it might reveal the truth about her relationship with John O'Keefe, and it could help prosecutors explain to the jury why Karen would kill John. But on the other hand, if there is some bad blood in this alleged love triangle, it could cause problems between John and Brian, which could lead to some violence and a reason for Brian to attack John. Which side of the sword the jury believes could be the difference between guilty and not guilty for Karen Read. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks for joining the investigation, and I will see you weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. Putting together a timeline related to a murder is crucial for investigators and then crucial for prosecutors while they try to convince a jury of what happened. Karen Read has been accused of killing her boyfriend with her SUV, and the timeline in this case is extremely crucial. I've covered this in depth on my weeknight show, Closing Arguments, and what you're about to see are some of the most important moments from that program as I investigate the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
Now, after you fall asleep at some point later on that morning or something, you wake up obviously at some period, correct?
Yes.
And you recall what it was that awoke you on that morning?
I mean, for lack of better words, my phone, both my work and my personal phones were blowing up. They were going off.
Who, if anyone, was blowing up your phone, or who was calling you at that?
Well, I think first it was Chief Berkowitz, and then Brian Albert.
And so, as far as that phone call that you received from Mr. Albert, based on whatever information that you learned from that, what did you do then?
I got dressed and went right over to the house at 34 Fairview.
How would you describe sort of the mood and demeanor of the people in the house?
People were pretty distraught.
And did you know why they were distraught?
Because John had been found on the lawn.
What was your reaction when you received that information?
It didn't make sense to me. I couldn't do the math in my head because I know John O'Keefe and the defendant never showed up.
In general, do you recognize what those are?
Yes.
What do you recognize those to be?
Text messages between the defendant and I.
Yes, sir, if I could ask you to read from that page.
In blue is going to be myself again. Foul ball. Defendant responded, "You stink." I said, "You suck and you're double trouble." Defendant responded, "You're hot." I responded, "Are you serious or messing with me?" Defendant responded, "No, I'm serious." I responded, "Feeling is mutual."
What, if anything, happened as you were exiting from Mr. O'Keefe's house that night?
So as I was exiting the house, and as we were walking out, the defendant planted a kiss on me.
And how did she kiss you?
Not like a friend.
Lip to lip, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Like a romantic kiss?
That's the way I interpreted it.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was taken back.
Was that something that you were expecting?
No.
And about how long was it between when the defendant kissed you and when you left?
Oh, almost immediately.
As far as that questioning, as far as posing to her, why did she reach out to you? Was that something that you asked once or more than once?
Yeah, I asked it more than once, and during the pendency of this communication, I was basically trying to suss out what the intentions were of the defendant. Was the defendant interested in me? Was she at the end of her relationship with John? Was she trying to weaponize me against John and put me in the middle? There was numerous things that were going on, and that's what I was trying to vet out or suss out or whatever you want to call it. But I was having a hard time accepting what was happening. The defendant said, "I told you!" ! I just think you like me and I'm attracted to you. And then she said, "A lot." I responded, "Feeling is mutual. I just never saw this coming." Defendant said, "Why?" ? I responded, "Because I just assumed you were happy with your situation." Defendant responded, "I was, but things have deteriorated." I'm proud of these text messages. It is what it is. I take responsibility for them. But, John was a friend at the same time, and I certainly wasn't. If they were at the end of the relationship, they were at the end of the relationship. But I wasn't going to have somebody utilize me and weaponize me against somebody that I liked.
The timeline is crucial in this case about who is there in front of the house and at what time do they get there, where do they park, what time do they leave. And after today, it's less clear to me. So we're going to try to create some clarity during the course of this hour. Like, my job is to watch the trial and understand this trial best I can to report on it. And if it's confusing for me, what's it like for the jury, right? Like, a lot of things are not making sense. Not making sense to me. And the biggest question I have after today's testimony is when did he leave, Brian Higgins? When did he leave that party? Because he was at the bar, then he went to the after party. But, like, when did he leave? Coming up next.
I was kind of being a smart ass, and I dropped the plow and I did a little sweep of the driveway, and then I got out of the driveway because I didn't want to get blocked in, and I parked.
You didn't see a Jeep?
No, sir.
With a big old snow plow on the front of it?
No, sir, I did not.
That car was never between your car and the SUV, was it?
I never saw any other vehicle in between us.
Friday nights, the WNBA is on Ion. I'm a legend. This week, the Lynx host the Sparks. It scores! And the Sky will battle the Mystics. Coverage starts Friday night at 7. Check local listings for game in your area. Ion, it's on.
This week,
We're getting you all ready for the major trials. Plus, Friday, our voice for the victims shines a light on the mystery behind the murders at an upscale shopping mall.
opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
What, if any, conversations would you have with Mr. O'Keefe in regard to any sort of relationships or dating or anything like that?
Well, he dated a lot of people.
When was it and how was it that you first came to know that person?
John called me and said, Karen and I are going to stop by because we had people over. And I said, who is Karen? Because I didn't know if he was going to bring someone from high school and surprise me with a random. I had never heard of her. And he said, you know who Karen is? The girl I'm dating. And I said, nope, but okay. And then they came over that night.
After Mr. O'Keefe said, calm down, that's Laura's little sister, I said, hi, nice to meet you. That's when Miss Reed's head snapped up, and she very loudly told me to go myself across the lobby. My sister pulled me aside from everybody and asked if the night that I got into the altercation with Miss Reed in the lobby, if I was making out with Mr. O'Keefe.
How did you respond?
That I absolutely was not.
As we got by different landmarks, she then started, screaming, asking if John could be at certain people's houses.
Bella was a child who was around the age of your daughter, correct?
Yes.
And there have been some years in the past dating relationship between Mr. O'Keefe and Bella's mother, correct?
Yes.
And so Ms. Reed is saying that in the car that morning as you're driving over to Fairview?
Yes, she asked, could he have been with Ashley And I looked at her and said no, because to me that was a crazy idea. And then Carrie had mentioned, oh, do you think he could have called somebody else that lived on a street over? And she started screaming, who's that, who's she?
And you recall who Carrie referred to?
Yes. A woman that John had previously dated. She said something like, John really loved Amy, and in my eyes, Karen was just a babysitter with benefits.
The defense has clearly tried to put the cloud of suspicion over Brian Higgins' head in the Karen Reed murder trial. And a big question involves his timeline and when he left the late-night party. Here's more of our investigation. The timeline of when people showed up, where they parked, when they left is incredibly crucial here to this case. Everything happening in front of the Alberts home, because that's where John O'Keefe's body was found, by the flagpole, and that's where prosecutors say the murder occurred. So let's take a listen to the testimony of Brian Higgins, who was at the house that night, drove his truck there with a plow. Here's what he had to say.
Do you know approximately what time you left the house on Fairview that evening?
I'd guesstimate it was anywhere between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, but I'm not 100% positive.
So relatively short period of time, is that correct?
It was a short period of time. I knew kind of from the onset when I got in there, it probably wasn't going to be a long time because I'm not a beer drinker and that's what they had. So I was probably one of the first people to leave.
Now, for that entirety of the time that you were there, did you go anywhere else within the home beyond what you've described as far as the kitchen and the living room?
No.
Did you go upstairs at any time?
No.
Did you go downstairs in any sort of basement area at any time?
No.
And when you exited the home, you recall which of the two doors that you described that you would have exited from?
The same door I came in, the breezeway.
Now, during the time that you were there, similar to what I asked about the waterfall, how would you describe sort of the mood or demeanor within the home?
It was fine. I mean, everybody was happy.
All right, so he's saying sometime between 12:30 and 1, he's one of the first to get there and one of the first to leave. So let's take a listen now to Allison McCabe, Allie McCabe, Colin Albert's friend who came to pick him up, what she testified about when she showed up.
What did Colin say at 11:50?
You can get me now if easier.
And what did you respond?
Okay, I am driving people home now.
And what did Colin respond to that, and what time did he respond?
He responded, word, get me after.
And this one, if you could scroll down. And following the get me after, what if any response did you provide?
KK, okay, and here.
And here that you texted, what time does that read on the screenshot?
12:10 a.m.
All right, so she's pulling up to get Colin Albert like 12:10. Okay. Here's Jennifer McCabe, who's texting John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe's with Karen Reed on the way over. So what time do we believe that Karen and John get to the house?
So this one is from myself to John, and it says here at 12:27. So at that point, I see a car out front, and I text him here.
Testified to as far as looking out the front storm door, seeing a car, and then you sent the text. That's the text.
Correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to that. And ma'am, similar, if you could just, who sent it, what's the content, and what is the time?
I sent to John, pull behind me at 12:31.
And what were you referring to when you said pull behind?
So at this point, the car had moved from the prior spot where I originally saw it. So I thought, what is he doing? Why don't they just pull behind me in the, in the driveway?
And, you just pull down. And again, with this bubble, if you could read out.
From me to John saying hello, and it was at 12:40.
All right, so you're looking at the time here. Higgins is there or might have left already. He said he left, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and that's like the time that John and Karen are showing up. I might take a couple images here because there's a couple possibilities on what's going on in front of the house around this time. You've got one situation here where you've got 3 vehicles, right? Karen Reed's is in the front. You've got Brian Higgins, it's been described, in the middle, and then the F-150 behind the car. But all the people in the F-150 are saying there is no Jeep there. What they're describing is like in this second image that we have, where Brian Higgins' car isn't there. So again, timing, when is he there, when is he not there? Take a listen to Brian Higgins now describing when he got there, what he saw, what he did.
I was kind of being a smart ass, and I dropped the plow and I did a little sweep of the driveway, and then I got out of the driveway because I didn't want to get blocked in, and I parked.
And do you recall where you parked in relation to the house?
I do, by the mailbox. So the back end of the Jeep would have been right around the mailbox itself. And the edge of the driveway is right there. I wanted to make sure that I was not blocking the driveway or blocked in.
And so the front of your vehicle would have been pointing in which direction?
I believe that'd be going towards Chapman Street.
Nothing obstructing your view outside, toward the lawn? Wasn't another car parked there?
No, I didn't. There was no vehicles in front of me, no.
It was the roadway was relatively empty.
There was no cars.
And you didn't see a body then either, did you?
I did not.
Then don't forget the testimony from Ryan Nagel. Julie Nagel's brother came to pick her up, and what he saw and what he didn't see when he pulled up in the F-150 with his friend Ricky and Heather.
Did any car pull in between Ricky's truck and the SUV when you were sitting behind the SUV?
No, sir.
You didn't see a Jeep?
No, sir.
With a big old snow plow on the front of it?
No, sir, I did not.
That car was never between your car and the SUV, was it?
I never saw any other vehicle in between us.
All right, fair enough.
Still to come.
Brian Higgins, yes, he knows who John is, but here's the issue with that. When he is in the federal grand jury, he can't say John didn't go in the house because then he would be purging himself. And he can't say John did go in the house because then he's flipping on the Alberts. So he met somewhere in the middle, and he said a tall male with dark hair came in the house. It could only be one person, John O'Keefe.
Eyewitness testimony is always filled with problems. Ask 5 people who saw the same thing, you'll get 5 different versions. And when you're trying to build a viable timeline of events, witnesses can wreak havoc. Kevin Linehan, this is a mess. This is an absolute mess. It makes no sense to me. No sense. Does it make any sense to you?
No, I've struggled to try to figure out for months where Brian Higgins parked, and it's still a little bit hard to make perfect sense of it. But sometimes you have to, you may not get a perfect explanation. You got to choose the better explanation when you're faced with different things here. So there's no question that John and Karen arrived at 12:24. There's no question that John's phone stopped moving at 12:32. It seems unlikely that all of the witnesses are lying here. So, you know, if they're going to suggest that Brian Higgins left before 12:24, well, how are they trying to set him up as part of the murder conspiracy here? When, if Brian Higgins ran over John, when did John get attacked by a dog? I mean, this defense team really created kind of a Mount Everest they have to climb because they sold us on a specific narrative. Was framed, that he was ambushed, that he was set up. Those are all the words that they use by all of these people. So they've given the jury an idea that they have a very specific idea of what the narrative is.
I get it,
and now they're just kind of.
I'm troubled here. I'm a former prosecutor. I've got the burden. Nick Rocco, do we know where he parked the car? Oh, Nick froze again. He freezes every night on us. Go ahead.
Come on, Nick. I don't know where he parked the car. I'm not sure what the relevance of where he parked the car is, but we do know that when Brian Higgins arrived to that house with Brian Albert, Colin, Brian Albert Jr., Sarah Levinson, and Julie Nagel were already inside. So when Brian Higgins and Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Caitlin now come into the home, they're all there. And the only other people that then come to the house is Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe. So, everybody's claiming Colin left the house. So it couldn't have been him that came back in the house that you see Brian Higgins talking about, a tall male with dark hair. So the only other people that they were expecting to come into the house at that point would be Karen and John. Now, you know, Brian Higgins, yes, he knows who John is, but here's the issue with that. When he is in the federal grand jury, he can't say John didn't go in the house because then he would be purging himself. And he can't say John did go in the house because then he's flipping on the Alberts. So he met somewhere in the middle and he said a tall male with dark hair came in the house. So who was that? He wants to say, oh, I thought it was Ryan Nagel, this and that. But Julie, in her testimony, stated she extended the invite to Ryan. They left. We know they drove off. They drove past Karen's vehicle. So who was that male? It could only be one person, John O'Keefe. So, I mean, as far as where the cars are parked, this and that, I think it was pretty clear today that there was some other male in the house that no one else is talking about except Brian Higgins.
So, Joseph Krowski Jr., what the level of confusion as to where he parked, and because it impacts what time he leaves, because Brian Higgins very, you know, doesn't know what time he left. But if he's leaving before anyone gets there, or is he leaving after everyone gets there, there's a big difference between leaving around 12:30 and leaving at 1 o'clock. Because you leave at 1 o'clock, there's a body on the front lawn, according to prosecutors.
So for about a year now, we've been hearing that Brian Higgins is the one that was going to flip. Brian Higgins ran to the feds and cut a deal and proffered, and the feds weren't going to let the case go to trial. And Brian Higgins was going to show up and refuse to testify today. That didn't happen. I think you're overstating the significance of where each car was parked, because think of this, just anecdotally. If you've had people over that posh house of yours in the Atlanta suburbs 2 years ago, you're not going to remember, and every person is not going to remember with precision the exact time that they left, the exact time they arrived, and every single car that was there when they either arrived or left. I'm just glad you didn't have poor Matt out driving the neighborhood with a Jeep with a plow attached to it tonight. What is important is we now have 13 separate civilians. Not one of them has John O'Keefe inside of that house. Despite Nick's best attempt to try to stretch it into being John O'Keefe, not one person is John O'Keefe in that house. And by the way, the whole new twist on Brian Higgins is that he had motive. So it was the 18-year-old kid 3 days ago. Now it's the unrequited, jilted lover, the hot guy.
All right. We're out of time for tonight. Rest up, guys. Rest up.
Better internet, Nick.
We'll do it all again.
I know.
There are a lot of reasons why this is a tough case for prosecutors. The first being all the witnesses who saw and heard things on the night in question were drinking. And things are just not lining up clearly. Now, this happens in many cases, but when the defense is alleging a conspiracy, it makes the problem drastically worse. The question is, will the jury see the witnesses as honestly mistaken or conspiring to frame Karen Reed? I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks for joining the investigation, and I'll see you weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments.